At the Christmas party, my daughter would later smirk at me and say, "Now you have lost your house." That moment was still days away, but looking back, everything had already begun long before I realized it. My name is Mara Ellington. I am 63. For most of my life, Christmas meant keeping the same routines that steadied me through widowhood and aging, the same recipes, the same ornaments, the same quiet house on Alderwood Street that I spent 30 years paying off. This year, I had hoped it might also mean something else, maybe a small thaw between me and my daughter. Lennon, she had been distant for months, but I kept telling myself that families drift and return. Drift and return. That is what they do. The first sign that something was different came in early December, when a white envelope from a bank I did not use arrived in my mailbox. It mentioned recent inquiries related to home financing. I set it aside, assuming someone had typed the wrong address. A week later, another envelope came. This one mentioned activity on an existing account. I remember touching the paper twice, then putting it under a stack of coupons as if hiding it could undo it. I told myself not to worry. I always told myself that. Lennon came by that same afternoon, still in her scrubs from the assisted living facility where she worked. She kissed my cheek, complimented the cranberry loaf cooling on the counter, and avoided my eyes every time I asked how things were going at her house. She talked in circles about overtime, about her husband's long shifts, about how her mother-in-law Ruth had been struggling again. Ruth Talford had been struggling for years. Failed businesses, unpaid personal loans, and now, I heard, medical bills that kept multiplying. She is trying her best. "Mom," Lennon said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. But her voice trembled at the edges, like she was holding something fragile and heavy behind her ribs. Back then, I chose to see it as fatigue. I told myself she was overwhelmed. I told myself she would open up when she was ready. 2 days later, another letter came. This one mentioning a home equity line of credit I had never touched in my life. I stood in the kitchen with the letter in my hand, Lennon's trembling voice replaying in my memory, and felt something shift inside me. Something small but sharp, like a thread snapping clean. I picked up the phone and dialed the number on the letter. I needed to know what was happening before it grew into something I could not undo. The man on the phone introduced himself as Russell from the loan servicing department. His voice was polite in the way people sound when they're reading from a script. "Mrs. Ellington, I'm calling to confirm details on the home equity credit line application initiated last month. I gripped the counter. I never applied for anything." There was a pause. Pages flipping. "It was submitted using an existing power of attorney. We just need to verify the draw amount before releasing funds." My chest tightened. "What power of attorney?" "It shows your daughter listed as temporary agent years ago during your shoulder surgery." Somehow, the document was still active in their system. I closed my eyes. A winter afternoon flashed across my memory the year I had shoulder surgery. The stack of papers Lennon brought to the hospital. The way she said, "Mom, this is just so I can handle your bills while you're recovering." I hadn't thought about it since. "That document was temporary," I whispered. "It doesn't specify an expiration date," Russell replied gently. "It's still active." I could hear him waiting for me to breathe. I wasn't sure I did. "How much?" My voice barely carried. "The credit line is for $140,000. No funds have been dispersed yet, but the approval is complete." Something inside me tilted, like the ground had slipped sideways. "I need copies of everything." "Yes, ma'am, I can email them to you." "Don't release anything," I said. "Not $1. I'll place a hold pending your review." After I hung up, the house felt too quiet. I set the phone down, my hand trembling. It took me a full minute to steady myself before I called Lennon. She answered on the 4th ring. "Mom, everything all right? We need to talk." I said. It's about the house. There was a small, sharp inhale on the other end, one she tried to cover with a cough. Mom, I was going to tell you. I sat down at the kitchen table. Tell me now. I said. Lennon showed up at my house before noon the next day, still wearing her work scrubs. Her hair pulled into a messy knot that made her look younger than she was. She didn't bother taking off her coat. She just stepped inside and shut the door behind her like she needed a barrier between herself and the world. Mom, I know why you called, she said, voice tight. I was going to explain. You should start now, I replied. She sat at the kitchen table, fingers twisting the fabric of her sleeve. Ruth's been in trouble again. Again, I kept my voice steady. You know about the bakery, she said. It failed because the landlord raised the rent. And then she had to take personal loans to pay the suppliers. And then her knee surgery. One thing at a time. Lennon, she swallowed, eyes darting away. She owes money everywhere. Mom, real money. Medical bills, cards, old debts from when she was still married to Daniel. She keeps getting collection calls. She cries every night. She says she can't breathe. I leaned forward. And what does that have to do with my house? Lennon flinched. I had to help. She's family. She's not your mother. She's my husband's mother, she said sharply, then softer, as if she regretted the edge in her voice. She raised him alone. She sacrificed everything. And she keeps telling me a real family saves each other, that if she loses everything, it'll be my fault for not stepping in. I stared at her. So you stepped in by taking from me. Her face crumpled. I didn't mean for it to go like this. Ruth was panicking. She said if she didn't pay the medical debt, the hospital would come after her house. She said she'd end up on the street. She begged me. She said I was her last chance. And you believed her. It sounded real, she whispered. She cries, Mom. She talks about dying. I didn't know what else to do. She said once we paid off the debt, everything would settle down. And my home, I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she pressed her palms to her eyes. I thought I was protecting everyone. I thought you'd understand someday. I let the silence stretch. She looked up at me, cheeks streaked with tears. I'm scared. Mom, I'm trapped. Her voice cracked on the last word, small and terrified. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the letter from the bank and Lennon's trembling hands. By morning, my chest felt tight, like something was pressing from the inside out. I made coffee, but it went cold untouched. On impulse, I opened my laptop and typed my address into Zillow. I told myself it was pointless, that nothing else could possibly be wrong. My house appeared instantly listed as pending, a full page, high-resolution photos. The living room staged with neutral throws I'd never bought. The caption read, Move-in ready. Quick close preferred. My throat went dry. I clicked through every image, and each one felt like a slap. Someone had walked through my home, touched my lamps, moved my furniture, arranged my dishes. Someone had taken what was mine and made it look like I no longer lived there. I dialed the listing agent's number with shaking fingers. He answered on the second ring. This is Chase. This is Mara Ellington, I said. You've listed my house without my consent. A pause. Ah, Mrs. Ellington. Your daughter gave verbal confirmation. She said you were preparing to downsize and didn't want to handle the paperwork. That's a lie, I said sharply. I never agreed to anything. Well, the buyers already walked through last week, he replied. They loved it. They're offering cash. We're trying to move fast so the funds can help settle a debt situation. My voice dropped to a cold, Steady line. What debt situation? Another pause longer this time. I believe it has to do with your daughter's mother-in-law. Medical bills. Maybe I'm not fully involved in their personal matters. I pressed my hand against the table to steady myself. So the plan was to sell my house to erase Ruth Talford's debts. I assumed you were aware, Chase said. Lennon insisted she had full authority. Send me the contract, I said. Every page. But now, he finally agreed. When the email arrived, I opened the attachments and stared at the signatures. Lennon's handwriting. My forged initials. Clauses I would never sign in my lifetime. My home hadn't just been taken. It had been sold on paper to erase another woman's chaos. I printed every document Chase sent, contracts, signatures, emails, and slid them into a folder. My hands shook the whole time. By the afternoon, I was sitting inside the small legal aid office on 7th Avenue, the folder pressed to my chest like armor. A young paralegal named Aria stepped out to greet me. Kind eyes. Steady voice. Mrs. Ellington, come with me. Inside her cubicle, I laid out the papers. She scanned each page, her brows tightening more with every line. Who signed this power of attorney, she asked. My daughter, I said. It was supposed to be temporary, from years ago. Aria tapped the document. This was meant for handling bills while you were recovering. It doesn't authorize selling property, opening credit lines, or transferring ownership. Whoever used it crossed legal boundaries. Is the sale real? I asked quietly. No, she said. A property can't legally be sold without the owner's signature. And your deed isn't transferred anywhere. What they attempted, it's a mess. But it isn't final. I exhaled. But nothing about the relief felt clean. You need to gather everything, Aria continued. Every letter. Voicemail, text, bank alert. Save it all and lock your credit today. If they used this once, they might try again. I nodded. What do I do about my house? You seal control, she said. Put the deed in a living trust. It won't stop them from trying, Kay, but it'll block unauthorized transfers. Anyone who attempts to sell or borrow against it will hit a wall. Her certainty steadied me in a way I didn't expect. I don't want my daughter arrested, I murmured. You're not accusing anyone of anything, she replied. You're protecting yourself. That's all. When I left the office, the winter air hit my face, sharp and cold. I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment before pulling out my phone. I contacted the credit bureau first, then the recorder's office, then my bank. Every call took something out of me, but each one also stitched a small piece of strength back in. By evening, the deed to my home sat inside a new living trust, with my name alone. Every document was saved in a new folder on my desktop. Every alert was forwarded to myself and printed twice. I didn't call Lennon. I didn't tell a soul. I went to bed knowing a storm was coming. And for once, I wasn't planning to stand in the doorway waiting for it to break me. By the time Christmas evening arrived, I already knew the truth. I knew about the forged initials, the staged photos, the contract waiting for a signature that would never come. I knew my deed was safely locked inside the living trust. But knowing didn't soften the sting of what waited behind my own front door. I stepped inside carrying a tin of cookies, pretending for one last moment that this was the Christmas I used to know. The sound hit me first. Laughter, clinking glasses. Music turned up too loud. My living room was full of people I didn't recognize. Co-workers of Ruth's, friends of Lennon's, neighbors who barely waved at me during the year. A cluster of them were gathered around the tree, raising their glasses like they were celebrating the end of a war. Lennon turned when she heard the door, her smile stretched wide, bright, rehearsed. "Mom," she said loudly, "you're here." Ruth stepped forward, wearing a sequined shawl and holding a glass filled to the brim. Mara! Sweetheart, welcome. We're celebrating fresh starts tonight. Fresh starts? My jaw tightened. Someone lowered the music. The whole room shifted toward me like an audience waiting for a cue. Then Lennon lifted her glass higher. Mom, I meant to tell you earlier, but it all happened so fast. She paused for effect, eyes glittering. You've lost the house, but it's okay. We handled everything. A hush dropped over the room. People watched me the way someone watches a glass fall from a counter bracing for the shatter. I set the cookie tin on the entry table. Is that what you think? Ruth stepped closer. Lennon did what needed to be done. I was drowning. Mara, medical debt. Collections. I had nowhere else to turn. This isn't about your debt, I said quietly. This is about my home. Lennon's chin lifted. Mom, it'll close in a few days. The buyers already moved money into escrow. You'll understand later. I looked at her for a long moment, my daughter. Standing in the middle of my living room claiming authority that was never hers. She waited for me to fall apart. Instead, I smiled. Not wide, not dramatic, just enough for the room to see. Lennon, I said, voice even. The house you sold is actually... Every head tilted, every breath seemed to stop, and for the first time all night, Lennon's smirk faltered. I let the silence stretch until every person in that room looked trapped inside it. Lennon waited for me to fall apart. Ruth pressed a trembling smile onto her face, like she could smooth this over with charm and cheap champagne. The guests leaned in, hungry for a scene. I kept my smile small. The house you sold, I said softly, is actually mine. Still mine. Fully mine. Lennon blinked. Mom, don't do this. We already closed. The buyers. There was no closing. I cut in. There couldn't be. My deed moved into a living trust 2 weeks ago. You only had access to an old power of attorney you never should have touched. A ripple went through the room. Ruth's voice pitched upward. What trust? You never said anything about a trust. I wasn't required to, I replied. I had to protect what was mine when I saw the listing online, the deeds in my trust. My signature is the only one that counts. And I didn't sign a thing. Lennon's eyes darted to the guests, as if searching for someone to back her up. Mom, you don't understand the paperwork, Chase said. Chase. I held her gaze. You mean the realtor who skipped the title search? The one who accepted your verbal confirmation about the property? The one who wrote a contract without verifying whether the power of attorney was valid? Chase himself wasn't there, but the room reacted as if he had been slapped. A man near the tree muttered, Wait, they listed a house without the owner's signature. Ruth's face drained of color. Lennon told me it was a sure thing. She said the money would come through by Christmas Eve. It couldn't come through. I said, the power of attorney expired years ago. The deed doesn't allow any transfer without my signature. The bank flagged suspicious activity, and the credit line is frozen. The sale is invalid, start to finish. Someone gasped. Another whispered, Oh God. The buyers! The couple near the back, the ones I suspected were the buyers, stood stiff as fence posts. Ruth spun toward Lennon. You told me you checked everything. You promised me I trusted you with this. Do you understand how much debt I'm drowning in? Lennon flinched. You begged me, Ruth. Every night you cried and said if I didn't help, you'd lose everything. You said Mom would be fine because she had retirement money. I never said that, I snapped. She broke. Her shoulders collapsed inward, and tears spilled fast. I didn't know what else to do. Mom, I thought I could fix everything before you noticed. I thought love meant stepping in. Love doesn't mean stealing. I said quietly, love doesn't mean selling what doesn't belong to you. And it doesn't mean letting someone convince you that betrayal is sacrifice. Ruth lifted her chin. desperate. You could still give consent. Just sign the deed now. Let the sale go through. It'll save us, I echoed. Or just you. She faltered. The guests stepped back from them both, physically distancing themselves from whatever disaster they now realized they were witnessing. Conversations died. Glasses stopped moving. The room had turned into a courtroom without a judge, and every pair of eyes had already voted. Lennon sank into the nearest chair, sobbing. Ruth stood frozen, righteous confidence leaking out of her like air from a punctured tire. I looked at them both. The sale is dead, and the mess you made trying to force it alive is your responsibility, not mine. No one reached for either of them, not even each other. And standing in the center of my own living room, I felt something unfamiliar settle inside me. Not triumph, not relief, but the quiet, painful certainty that whatever we once were as a family had cracked beyond repair. 1 year later, the house felt different, not larger, not brighter, just finally mine again. On Christmas morning, I woke to the soft hum of the heater and the faint sweetness of the cinnamon rolls I'd baked the night before. No voices, no strangers, no celebration I never agreed to, just the quiet that no longer hurt. Around noon, Teresa knocked with her usual cheer and a warm casserole. "You're not spending Christmas alone, Mara," she said, stepping inside before I could protest. A little later, Daniel from the clinic arrived carrying pastries and laughing about how he almost slipped on my front walk. By mid-afternoon, a small circle of people filled my living room: neighbors, co-workers, and 2 friends from the community center. People who came because they cared, not because they wanted something from me. We spent the afternoon talking about work, aches in our knees, simple joys, and how the past year had changed each of us. No one brought up last Christmas. The silence around it wasn't avoidance, it was respect. At one point, Teresa's gaze drifted toward the mantel. "You kept her picture up," she murmured. Lennon smiled from the silver-frame sunlight in her hair, laughter caught in a moment untouched by debt or desperation. "I keep it," I said, to remember who she was before everything twisted, before Ruth, before the fear. Daniel exhaled softly. "Family's messy. Family's chosen," I replied. "Blood just writes the first chapter." A quiet settled over us, not heavy, but warm, like the closing of a wound. By evening, everyone drifted home, leaving behind empty plates and a gentle comfort that lingered. I stood by the front door watching snow fall across the quiet street, feeling a peace I hadn't touched in years. If you've ever rebuilt your life piece by piece, or learned who truly stands with you, like this story, leave a comment, like, and subscribe for more. I turned off the porch light, closed the door, and let the house settle around me, a life finally mine again. When you finally rebuild a life no one can steal, who do you choose to let inside?